We are currently witnessing an attack on the Bitcoin price, and the rate is being suppressed. These are the latest statements from Bitcoin legend Samson Mow, who are speaking about the current developments. And I also see it very often in the comments where people are currently commenting, hey, everything is so bullish, you're only making bullish news. Why isn't the Bitcoin price escalating yet? And Samson Mow is one of the most extreme bulls in the Bitcoin space. Compared to Samson Mow, I'm still in the bear camp. He is now sharing his ultra-political new Bitcoin perspective with the world. The Bitcoin price should already be much, much higher. He also discusses possible causes and a potential scenario, how this can play out, and that indeed big things are ahead of us. I know it can sometimes be difficult during a sideways phase here, just to hodl through and do nothing, not sell, not panic. That's why it can sometimes be helpful to get some hopium from Samson Mow. Maybe he's exaggerating a bit, I don't know, with his new price prediction too. Maybe there's something on the overly bullish side, but even if so, his analyses are still razor sharp. And he just deducts 20 or 30% from what he predicts here. We're going to look at his statements now because they are highly explosive.
So, much good news breaking out left and right. Positive regulatory environment. GameStop. But what's going on with the price? What's happening? Is it being manipulated, man?
I don't know, but it's not right. So I think Bitcoin should be at 0.2 million or 200K. And the CIO of Bitwise said the same thing. We are far undervalued compared to where we should be now. And of course, that's just my gut feeling, and it's probably his gut feeling too, but it doesn't feel right. Usually, what happens, I think, when things don't quite match up is that there's a quick reconciliation. It has to balance out all this optimistic news. And we're kind of stagnant, and in the 80 range, not even in the 100 range. It's just wrong. And it should adjust and self-correct, which means, 10K candles, maybe a 100K candle. And that will steer us in the right direction. Yeah. So, we're going to see the Omega candle.
So we now have a new person here, Samson Mow, who is also talking about a price discrepancy. He's also talking about the Bitwise CEO here. I have also reported in the past, several times over the last few weeks, about Adam Beck, who always talks about us having a price asymmetry, or macroscope, who also talks about it, that the Bitcoin price should be much higher. But what about now? Samson Mow says that the Bitcoin price will sooner or later stabilize again. That means we might be a bit more bearish or a bit lower than we should be, according to the new situation. But it could be that this balances out relatively quickly. This is his thesis. This means that if we, for example, return to a risk-on sentiment, then it might not be a slow rise, but rather a relatively quick one. And then the capital doesn't flow in slowly, but rather all at once. And then he just goes on from 10K candles to 100K candles. He even says, that's exaggerated. That's not going to happen now. But he also explains later why that statement of his was a bit exaggerated. But let's listen further to what else interesting he has to say.
I can hardly wait to see an Omega candle. I think I'm talking with B1. We're going to let an Omega candle come out of the volcano.
Maybe we'll post that if...
So, 100K candle there in one day.
Probably won't be in one day. You'll probably see, 50K in one day. And then we'll get to 100 later. But we'll eventually get there. We managed the 10K candle in one day. Is that already checked off? It was about 19K. If you count the reds, there are about 9 or 10 of them.
That's pretty funny now, you have to admit. They're laughing their asses off because they're talking about Omega candles here, and Omega candle is a 100,000 US dollar price movement in a day. A God candle is a 10,000 US dollar price movement in a day. And we've already had that. We've already had 10,000 US dollar price candles in one day, or some people also call them Valhalla candles. I don't know how a Valhalla candle is defined. Feel free to write it in the comments below. Is it a 10,000 move or a 100,000 move? I actually don't know myself. I always talk about Valhalla candles, but I don't really know how they're defined, to be honest. So please write it in the comments below. In any case, it's a massive fluctuation, that much can be said. But now they're saying, hey, there have already been all the Omega candles and the Valhalla candles, but most of them were negative, most of them were red. Sure, I think we had 2 green ones or so, but 8 of them were red. That means we had the positive movement of $10,000. Not upwards, but downwards. This means we currently see that the explosiveness in the Bitcoin market is more downward. That means it goes up relatively steadily. But when it falls, it can sometimes fall relatively rapidly. This is nothing new. We've had this partially in the past as well. But it is definitely a very, very interesting observation here.
You see a 10K drop and a 10K rise.
Well, it makes me feel alive again, even when it goes down, because Bitcoin is behaving like a stable coin right now.
It's weird, man. Yeah, it's strange. You know what?
The cycle reminds me of Samson, reminds me of 2017.
Yeah, what else happened? In 2017, it ended at 20K. I think a tenfold increase is within the realm of possibility, so very likely. Okay. Simply because there's so much demand, and the supply is limited. And the rest of the world hasn't realized yet that the supply is limited, right? The world is used to printing fiat money, and we can print our way out of the problem we've created. We can always have an emergency exit, or there's a way to do something. We can adjust the interest rates, or whatever. But with Bitcoin, you can't do anything. There are only 1.5 million. And I don't think the world has woken up to this fact yet. Otherwise, they would already be scrambling to buy it. Of course, given the demand from the US. 1 million is the Bitcoin law from Cynthia Loomis, right? To acquire 1 million. And then there's a proposal to acquire about 2 million. Bitcoin, in the form of a Bitcoin bond or Bitcoin. So that's about 3 million in demand. Where is that supposed to come from? Sailor now has 500,000. ETFs continue to accumulate. And now GameStop comes into play with $4.6 billion in cash. And there are other players with a lot of cash, like Berkshire. So what's going to happen? The number is rising. Probably. The number is rising. That's right.
So he has now listed all the bullish price drivers, like the ETFs, Michael Saylor, Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, Cynthia Loomis, Bitcoin Bonds, and so on. And he also says, hey folks, most haven't realized yet what Bitcoin really means. Bitcoin means absolute scarcity. I mean, on the other hand, that's the big advantage. That means you can see it negatively, like Samson Mow might say, yes, the price is too low. On the other hand, one can actually be thankful because if people realize that Bitcoin is limited, if people understood what Bitcoin really represents, then Bitcoin would be at a much higher price. That's also what Michael Saylor always says. The optimal investment is one that everyone needs. That is something no one can stop, but also no one understands yet. And that's exactly the case right now, Bitcoin. By the way, I've just arrived in El Tunco. Check this out. It's also a surf town here in El Salvador. It's pretty crowded here, quite touristy. But we definitely want to continue listening to what Samson has to say, because now it's getting really interesting. Now it's about potential Bitcoin price manipulation.
The vast majority, meaning Sailor's coins and the majority of the ETFs, all have their Bitcoin custody with Coinbase. And I remember having a conversation with, I think it was Caitlin Long and Larry Leppert, and they were talking about rehypothecation. So I'm putting two and two together. I'm thinking technically we see all these Bitcoin purchases, but there's really no way to verify it. Could be paper Bitcoin. And I mean, that could be an explanation for why we're not seeing this upward volatility.
I don't think it's paper Bitcoin. I mean, the hardcore crypto anarchists among the Bitcoin community probably think, yeah, it's paper, but it's highly unlikely that it's paper. I don't think Bevan Armstrong wants to go to jail, and I have more confidence in Saylor that he has the Bitcoin. I think the price is just, it's being suppressed. When we're flat and people are a little worried, hedge funds and prop trading firms can push the price down, right? They just have to, execute a sell order at the same time, right? From time to time, you see a spike on the chart. And we know that someone entered an order incorrectly. And that's why it dropped the price. So it's just a feed and can be manipulated by a few firms all making a mistake at the same time. And that causes a panic. That brought us down like in the 70s, right? And it takes time to recover because it's the market sentiment. But the price feed is completely separate from the supply of Bitcoin, which is dwindling. And we actually have no clear idea of how much is actually for sale. We have people saying, oh, there's always someone who will sell. And there's always some whale who will sell and buy a villa and a jet or something like that, right? But from all the OGs I've talked to, none of them are really changing their lifestyle. So I don't know who is selling. So it must be again that this supply is being absorbed at this 80K range by all these big players. That has to stop at some point. Yes, I agree.
I mean, the way I see it in my head, it's like a beach ball. You push it underwater, and the deeper you go, the stronger that beach ball will just shoot up. So, yes, I completely agree with you.
Interesting points there. They talked about paper Bitcoin first. That means you have to understand this now. For example, back then at FTX sold Bitcoin, but they didn't actually have it in their balance. And so it could be that the price is being pushed down here because they are philosophizing, okay, where is the manipulation coming from now? For example, in the gold market, we know very clearly that gold price manipulation comes from paper certificates, essentially from paper gold. Gold price should actually be much, much higher, but it is suppressed by gold certificates. However, Samson Mow says no. He doesn't believe that there are paper Bitcoins involved here. He also doesn't say that Saylor will issue paper Bitcoins. If anything, more likely, Bevan Armstrong, but he doesn't really want to go to jail either. That would be here, Coinbase. But then it continues here. Samson Mow says he thinks the manipulation comes more from the hedge funds, from the prop traders. And he just says that people are trying to manipulate the prices. Oh, look now, a dog is blocking the way here. I have to get past. I'll squeeze through. And he just says that the big hedge funds, the big investment firms, are trying to suppress the price, to create a negative sentiment in the market. And when there's a negative sentiment in the market, like currently, then it's relatively easy to keep the price stable. They were discussing this earlier as well. Bitcoin is now a stable coin and so on. And that's simply the problematic part, that Bitcoin also depends on the sentiment. But he also says at the same time, he doesn't know any big whales or big OGs or anything like that who are currently selling. Because that's, for example, the crazy thing, you often have the idea, and these were also the claims from the ECB, that yes, the Bitcoin people will all get rich with Bitcoin, then they'll all get Lumbos and big villas and so on. But Samson Mow says the opposite here. No, it's all the OGs. And he knows Adam Back, and who knows who else, he knows all these people. He says, no, they're not getting Lembos, they're not getting big houses or anything like that. They're just chilling. They live their lives normally and haven't really adjusted their lifestyle according to their wealth. Yes, accordingly, he also says that there really aren't any sellers. That's why. They also go into the whole volleyball story. I've already used this example that we simply have the volleyball now, which is being pushed underwater. And as soon as the market sentiment changes here, as soon as we go into a risk-on sentiment, or as soon as something shifts here, and maybe we pick up positive sentiment again, then it could change quite suddenly. And then it might happen, as Samson Mow says here, that there will be the God candles, the Valhalla, the Omega candles, whatever you want to call it, that all of that will happen. I understand that some people will say again, yeah, players and blah, 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 it's okay, it's okay. Feel free to write it in the comments below. This is just one perspective here. From Samson Mow, I always show you different perspectives. I show you from time to time critical points. I also often show you critics of the ECB or other institutions, and so on. You just watch it. You have to form your own opinion. I am definitely in the Buddhist camp. What you do then, you have to decide. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below for you to. 21 Bitcoin. Here you can buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. And with the code, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Highly recommended. Peace out.